The scene is set.
Eucalyptus.
Invasive albino king snakes.
Emerald ash borer and its parasitoids.
The world's largest amphibians.
The invasive species that is humans. I'm Kirsten.
And I'm Nicholas. Welcome to the Anthropocene. Good, we don't have COVID.
I'm not sure if I don't have COVID, actually. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Snip's pandemic edition. Just kidding. It's been a pandemic forever and ever.
Right. This whole podcast is the pandemic edition.
That's true. It is. We missed you guys. We're very sorry. We know things have been inconsistent, and we appreciate everyone that hangs out and waits for us. Things have been really crazy. Some of us have been sick, and then other ones were sick, and then I adopted some foster puppies. I guess I didn't adopt. I'm fostering some puppies
that
because
would defeat the purpose of foster puppies if you adopt them.
Well, I mean, at some point we might accidentally foster fail because they might not get adopted, but we'll see how it goes. They were abandoned in a trash bag in the city, and someone brought.
That's how I was born.
Oh. Jesus, that's where your parents found you.
No, that's where they put me.
Oh, that's right. I meant your now parents.
Yeah.
Oh man. So yeah. Anyway, we just wanted a quick note to say thank you to everyone who is still around. We love you so very much.
Right, and we're sorry.
Yes.
I had the C word, so I was out for. We were supposed to actually record a really fun episode of the podcast, which we didn't end up doing, and I'm not going to give it away now. But we had something really cool planned, and we're still going to do it. It just got moved, but it pushed everything back. And on top of that, obviously, we have to work with different schedules, different time zones, and different. I was going to say continents, which is accurate, but I would also say different hemispheres is makes things challenging. Plus the fact that, we are both heavily dedicated to what we do in our typical jobs and stuff because we do this, on the side. So another apologies. I was supposed to prepare a snip for today, and I kind of took the easy way out and threw up a questionnaire on Instagram so we could do another Q&A episode. So people had another chance to get to know us and ask us questions about things we know or perhaps don't know. I haven't really looked at any of the questions yet, so some people might have asked some stuff that I just don't know. Sometimes, I think last time we prepped, didn't we?
We didn't either, but I think I saw the questions at least briefly before, but I have no idea what's coming at me.
Yeah, I got nothing either. So
good. It's exciting this way.
Right, yeah, exactly. And it also lets you know just exactly how much knowledge we have because it will show exactly where that knowledge starts and where that knowledge ends. So without further ado, I basically am just going to go through questions. Nobody said that they wanted to remain anonymous for the most part, but I'm not going to repeat the question asker's handle for every question because some people ask multiple questions, if that makes sense. I just don't need to shout everybody out that many times. For future reference, if you're listening to this podcast and you want to be featured in an episode like this, then ask us questions. We love answering questions, and not enough people ask us questions to make these episodes very frequently. But if that happens more frequently, we'll be more inclined to do so. And then, of course, after this episode, we will return to our normal content.
Without further ado.
Right. Are you ready?
I think so.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the first one. Okay.
Wow.
So some of these are literally directed to each of us, and some of these are just general questions, and then some of these were probably one person's going to be able to field better than the other one. So this one might be for both of us. So how do I'm not inclined. I'm literally looking these on Instagram right now. So the first question is, what do you do to disinfect gear, clothing, and etc. between sites? What if you were visiting multiple sites in one day? And that was asked by GR Photos. So that is actually a great question. And it's something that I think we've talked about in a few episodes, but maybe not extensively. So I do herpetological research. and I cannot speak for other forms of research, but I assume sanitization in field science is pretty standard across the board. But when I'm answering this question, just keep in mind that I'm coming from a very specific herpetologically oriented sanitation process. So depending on if I'm doing my own research or if I'm going out herping or if I'm working on somebody else's sites, there's actually different protocols. So I have my own protocols that me and my assistants must meet for disinfecting on my properties. However, the properties that I survey that are not owned by the district that I work for have different sanitization requirements that I follow when I'm there. And then conversely, there was a third thing I was going to say, but it immediately slipped my mind. So basically what I'm trying to say is with herpetological surveys and things of that nature, there's a few things that we're really, really trying to prevent the spread of. Predominantly, you're looking at like Ophidiomyces, also known as SFD, snake fungal disease, and batrachochytrium. So there's two versions of batrachochytrium, which is like basically a fungus, I'm pretty sure off the top of my head, but there's Batrachochytrium dendropatitis and Batrachochytrium salamandivorans, I think something to that nature, and one affects more frogs and the other is like salamanders, and these are infections. These are bacterial infections, I believe, not fungal. Snake fungal diseases, something like that. And again, this is where my lack of knowledge is coming into play. All I know is they each affect those specific herpetological animals. That being said, what I tend to do is isopropyl alcohol, sanitize everything in a spray bottle, spray everything down. Some people will require you to actually like submerge the items in isopropyl alcohol or some sort of solution containing different chemicals that are disinfectants. A lot of people will use like bleach. Depending on whether it's a terrestrial survey or an aquatic survey, I use like a bleach mixture or isopropyl alcohol. When I'm like in the field and it's quick and easy, because isopropyl alcohol obviously evaporates very quickly, and I don't want to be just taking like massive amounts of highly concentrated isopropyl alcohol into contact with these animals, especially on like your hands or gloves or anything like that. Isopropyl alcohol evaporates really easily. So by the time you spray it on your boots and then go to the next site, it's evaporated and disinfected everything. Bleach doesn't necessarily dry as easily, and then also can kind of stay in the hands more. So if I am done for the day, I will use like a bleach solution to kind of disinfect everything. There's different regulations and stuff depending on where you're going. But for the most part, I try to disinfect everything. And I know the other part of the question is, what if you're going to multiple sites? Well, you sanitize in between every single site. And you sanitize before you leave the site, because you don't want to give any sort of bacteria or fungus or anything like that a chance to spread within your like vehicle or whatever you're transporting that stuff in, and it may miss disinfection or anything like that. So be thorough. And a lot of people, I feel like, just avoid the process because it can be kind of tedious, but it's really not. When you get to a site, sanitize your stuff if you haven't been anywhere, and then when you leave a site, sanitize everything. So don't be taking anything. Don't take any unsanitized gear off site. Always sanitize on site and before the next site. If you're going in between sites or even in between populations, for example, some of the salamander sites that I do are miles and miles apart, but sometimes you have to hike. So I will sanitize after one survey so that if there's any sort of thing, even if it's not one of those big three sort of intrusive things that I mentioned before, I just try to keep each population separate. And then, of course, with amphibians and things, it's just better to mitigate handling in general. It's just better for their own health and stuff. So that's my answer to that question. Kirsten, what would you have anything to add?
I mean, I was gonna say, like, a big spray bottle with alcohol is your best friend, and just to really spray down your stuff before you go. I don't do a lot of field work, as some of you guys know, so I don't have as much input as you do. But yeah, just essentially spray around your boots, all the gear that you're using. If you're using gloves, spray those down. If your backpack was sitting in the ground, that kind of stuff. You don't have to like spray down every inch of your body and your jackets and that kind of thing. But the things that you're thinking about that were, touching surfaces.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything that you think may have come into contact with something, anything that the specimens touched or anything like that.
Yeah, my only other point to add is, like bleach is also not good if you're like spraying it on your boots and stuff. You can like wreck your boots.
Right, exactly. Yeah, or if you have something with any sort of coloration to it, it's not going to have coloration afterwards. So I think a lot of people do avoid bleach nowadays too, because of the fact that it doesn't necessarily, it can stay there for a long time, especially if you're using a bleach solution where it's diluted, because realistically, you shouldn't just be putting 100% bleach on like anything. Like even for bleaching bones, I use like a 1-to-8 ratio of bleach to water to bleach bones, because otherwise it literally tears the bones apart. So if you're going to go with a bleach solution, look up recommendations. I can't remember what, but like certain websites, like maybe the FWC or something like that, have actual like recommended regulations for sanitization processes. So you know what we can do? We can link something like that in the show notes. And by we, I mean Kirsten, because that's not my part of the job.
Making a note.
Which is why I make promises that she has to fulfill. Okay, next question, which I'm going to try and not go on too long about, because it can easily get out of hand when you put this level of power in my hands. But pretty basic. But why do you do what you do? That was asked by Valley View Tropicals. I'll let you go first, Kirsten, and I'll base my answer off of the length of yours.
Oh, God. Why do I do what I do? Okay. Well, for me, like originally studying biology and ecology was just kind of always there. I've always been such a big fan of, of course, like as a young kid, like animals specifically, but I also always loved plants and finding fungi and, ants and stuff. I remember I got in trouble once because I'd built a Lego house and I was like putting the ants that had gotten into our house inside it. And then my sister told on me and my mom made me throw out my ants. It was very sad.
Damn it. Unfair.
So for me, the passion starts young. And, I'm just, in terms of, the science communication and the podcast stuff, for me, it's just so important that other people get as excited as I do about not just like conservation and, the important stuff, like we have to conserve these things, but just about how neat some of these things are. I have this like cute little anecdote that I had an Uber driver the other day, and he found out I was in entomology, like with insects, and he was kind of like, oh, that's kind of weird. And I told him a couple different stories about some different ant behaviors and stuff, and he just left like totally amazed by the world. And he was like, I loved this ride. Like, thanks so much. That was awesome. And I was like, okay, like little things like that, getting people excited about just our weird, wonderful world. I guess that's why I do what I do. And so we can all do a little bit better, I think.
I think it's a fantastic answer. It also reminds me of a very funny story that I haven't gotten to like officially tell, but it goes like, it coincides super well with your story of like, if you're good at communicating science and stuff, you can get anybody interested in it. Like I'm a firm believer in that. And I say this because there was an instance when I was out looking for salamanders. It wasn't like a official herp survey or anything. I was just out looking for salamanders. And this is a spot that I frequent like all the time. And there are always people walking around the woods, and they're like dressed up in like full body suits and stuff like that. Like a full body suit sounds weird. It's not like a morph suit. I mean, like they're dressed in like office attire.
Okay.
Like they're wearing like they're dressed like they should be working in the office. And they also are like usually like middle-aged. Not that there's any age limit on like herping or anything like that or enjoying nature, but like it just seemed odd that these people were completely off trail in the woods where I was at. And I was like, man, people really love salamanders around here. And for the last maybe half hour of my hike, I kept hearing like branches breaking, and I spend enough time in the woods that I know when it's an animal versus a human walking through the woods, but I couldn't see anyone. So I was getting a little creeped out because I was kind of in an unfamiliar place. Like I know the woods well, but I don't actually know the neighborhood around it and stuff. So I wasn't sure what was going on. And finally, I see a guy just like walking through the woods and like kind of walking behind me, keeps looking at me and stuff. And years ago, I probably would have been freaked out by that kind of behavior. But like then I started looking at myself from other people's perspective and, put myself in their shoes. And all they're seeing is this guy in the bottom of a dry creek bed with a massive like camera and diffuser set up, photographing like a salamander in the middle of the woods. It's weird, so.
Well, can I just before you keep going, like when you were talking about the morph suits, I was like, what the F is going on in Illinois? Like,
I would not put it, honestly, if that happened, I wouldn't bat an eyelash. It'd be completely within the realm of, yeah. So the guy keeps getting closer and like kind of hiding behind stuff. And I was like, oh, he's a herper. He's really shy, So science brain kicks in and I go, hey, what's up, dude? And like wave at him. And he like looks at me and he's like, oh, cool. So starts walking over. And I'm like, oh, definitely a herper. He obviously knows what I'm doing because otherwise he wouldn't walk over this way. Walks up to me or whatever. And I'm like, you must be looking for salamanders too. And he's like, no. And like, doesn't even faze me. I'm just like, well, that's weird. Why are you out here? Nature's awesome, I guess. So I start breaking it down. I was like, oh yeah, well, I'm looking for salamanders. You ever seen one before? He's like, oh, I've never seen one. I was like, dude, I got one right here. Like I held up my hand. And I was like, these are actually really cool salamanders. They're unisexual polyploidal salamanders, which means they reproduce through kleptogenesis. And that means that they're an all-female species of salamanders that aren't actually a species because they steal the genetics from other blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? And so like this dude's like getting stoked about this and stuff. He's like, so they're just like around? And I was like, yeah, man, it's so cool. He's like, oh man, I'll have to come out next time and like actually hike out here. And then it like still didn't occur to me that this guy's not outside to hike. Like he even said like he's just not there. So I'm like, what is going on? And I told some people about this story and they're like, search it on this app or whatever. Turns out I was at the hottest hookup spot in the area. So this dude just assumed that I was one of the people looking to hook up with someone and like waved him over into the woods, which makes sense now based on all of the things I found in the woods in that area, which are suspicious. But like, people can do whatever they want. I don't judge. Use nature for whatever you want as long as you don't litter. And so yeah, I basically gave this guy who was assuming that I was calling him over to hook up with me an entire conversation about unisexual polyploidal salamanders, and he seemed to enjoy the whole thing. So, I mean, hey,
Oh my God. I mean, yeah, there's always a chance to tell somebody about something you're passionate about, even if it's when they're trying to bone you in the woods.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, that usually is a great way to spark interest in the first place. So if you're going to do science, look hot while doing it, I suppose. But to answer the actual question that was asked, and I'm going to keep this really, really brief because of that story, but I'm not going to give my whole origin story because we could talk about like what actually got us into it in a future episode or something like that. But I basically do what I do because I feel like if I don't do it, like then that's just one less aspect of conservation that's happening. Now, does one person really make a difference? I guess it really depends on the person and the breadth of their expansion in like a literal sense. But if you think about it, if everybody does a little thing, and I know this is a super cliche answer, but if everybody just does a little bit of conservation efforts and stuff, it makes a massive, massive change. So if somebody's putting like really, really intense efforts into conservation and education and stuff like that, then it can make a difference, especially if there are multiple people doing that, which is why a huge part of my overall like conservation goal is networking and partnerships, because I understand that it is very difficult for one person to make a significant difference in this massive world that we live in. But if you have friends and partners and, colleagues and stuff like that you work with, then it actually becomes a pretty manageable and attainable thing. And I think that if I don't actively seek out to try and make a difference in the world, then I just it's not like a guilt thing, because I do all of this with like so much passion. I don't do this because I feel an obligation to in so much of that sense, more as like, I love nature. I understand its importance and stuff like that. And I just want to do everything so that people can understand and appreciate the beauty that is present in nature. And that means appreciating everything at every level, which is why I'm an ecologist and also an educator. So that's why I do what I do, because I love it. And I'm losing my voice. Probably doesn't help that I'm drinking a super acidic LaCroix. Shocking, I know.
This episode brought to you by no, I'm just kidding.
Nicholas McCartney is brought to you by LaCroix. Okay. Okay, cool. So this one is definitely another one we can both tackle. So the next question is, what are jobs dealing with invasive species like? By, oh my goodness, it won't let me see the person's name. It's Jenny. I gotta look this up. I'm sorry. Yeah. So the next question is from Jenny Wren Rambles. Sorry if I got that wrong, but great pictures of birds and flowers. Love it. And the question is, what are jobs dealing with invasive species like? We can approach this from two ways. We can approach it from the physical dealing with invasive species, and we can approach it from the technical and educational aspect. I will take the physical since that is my main job. So I feel like this isn't just like I don't think that like dealing with invasive species, there's not something fieldwork related that really sets it specifically apart from other jobs, other than the fact that you see the world in a completely different way. So when you like hyperfixate on invasive species and invasive species removal, it kind of does to a certain extent taint your perception of habitats when you go and visit them, because most people will see them for like these beautiful habitat based on like topography and things like that. Meanwhile, floristically, I'll go and I'll be like, well, damn, there's a lot of invasive buckthorn around here that could really be cleared out of these woodlands, opening them up. And, you know, like I've gone out with people who are specific biologists, so like herpetologists or something like that. And they're like, this is insane habitat. Like the habitat is pristine here. And they're talking like hydrologically or geologically or something like that. And I'm looking around and I'm like, wow, this is surrounded by like an invasive mid-story tree that is absolutely causing the soil destruction of this area and things like that. So from that aspect, like it does taint your perceptions. But I also feel like that's kind of the same with any job where you get like hyper experience in things. You have like higher standards for whatever that specific field may be. That being said, it's difficult. I think invasive species removal is probably like one of the most tough jobs that it's definitely the toughest job I've ever done, but it's one of the toughest jobs I can think of because you're out in the most extreme conditions, in the most extreme environments. So I'm thinking to places like in the winter, the coldest, to put it into perspective, and this is unprepared, so I don't have the conversions to Celsius, and I do apologize. But the coldest weather I've ever worked in is negative 45 degrees Fahrenheit, and the warmest weather I've ever worked in was 123 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's not including the heat index. The hottest I've ever been in was a prairie prairies are heat sinks, so they basically hold on to a lot of heat, and it's like significantly hotter within them than the ambient air temperature outside of them. As soon as you walk into a prairie in the summer, you feel the difference. It's usually about 15 to 30 degrees different. It was 115 degrees outside with the heat index, and I took a temp gun into the prairie just to see what was going on. The ground temperature was 142 degrees Fahrenheit, and the ambient air temperature was like 133 or something like that.
So 46 degrees and then like 60 degrees and then more than that.
Yeah. So it was hot and cold. Obviously not relative to each other, but very, very over 100 degrees, well over 100 degrees difference in those two temperatures. So yeah, And like these are exceptional extremes. These are like rare occurrences. This is not a regular thing. I don't want people thinking like, what the hell is going on in Northern Illinois? It's not like that. This is over the years of, almost a decade of restoration work I have.
I was going to say they're already a little bit concerned about what's going on in Northern Illinois.
Yeah, that's true. We got guys in morph suits running around the woods. It's hot. What else are you going to wear? So yeah, and then just the physical aspect of it, depending on like obviously it depends on the job and the contracts and stuff like that. But sometimes you're hauling like multi-100-pound logs and putting those on your back and stuff like that, hauling them great distances, putting yourself under extreme physical strain, extremely physically demanding conditions. Depending on like I'm private now. Like I work for, I'm a public entity, but I'm not like a private contractor or anything like that. When I was a private contractor, it's like you have standards to meet. You have to do it. You don't have a choice. So if somebody on your crew isn't working good enough, then you have to make up for that. At least that's what a good, leader should do. But anyway, it's difficult. It is an extremely, extremely physically demanding thing. But also I would say that you get to see the difference you make because you're literally removing the invasive species, which most of the time are insanely visible. And you can actually see like, oh, wow, we've actually improved this. At least this is from a floristic standpoint as well, because obviously with a lot of invasive species that are fauna and stuff like that, you can't actually see the difference because there's just so many of them and they move and all that kind of stuff. But if you're hyperfixating on a single ecosystem, you're doing a floristic restoration, you can see the difference. And it does actually make a difference over the following years as well. So that's what it's like.
However, if you have a animal that's invasive that, for example, like eats a whole bunch of one type of vegetation or something, after the removal, you will see a difference as well. So.
Right. Yeah. For example,
or you might see a bounce back of something else, or yeah.
Right. Yeah. You get to see like the habitat be restored, which means more abundance of native species sometimes. And also, like for a specific example, if you remove all the buckthorn and honeysuckle, which are both of the invasive shrubs I've already mentioned in this episode, almost like I planned it, which is surprising. You don't get as much organic matter deposition into the ground, which means that the invasive worm populations don't have as much to eat. So within a couple years of buckthorn removal, you get like up to like, I think a 50% reduction in the invasive earthworm populations, which means you can like preserve soil horizons. Fun facts.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, actually, this might be a spoiler, but at some point I definitely have to do an earthworm episode because so many people have no idea that they shouldn't be in most of the places they should, because we're so like, they're like so naturalized because they've been here for so long.
They're the honeybee of underground.
Ooh. the long boy of
right, the long, yeah.
All right, yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's super physically demanding for sure. I don't actually work directly with invasive species except for through this podcast, and I'm going to be collaborating on a paper pretty soon, and hopefully we can do a episode on that. But I definitely think what you said about changing your perspectives is so true, because like I used to be like, wow, cool, these trees are so amazing in the Parque Metropolitano here, and then I was like, well, now that I'm here, I'm like, oh, eucalyptus. And I think it can be really cool in a lot of ways too, because to do this properly, we have to see things in like an unbiased way. And I mean, there's never zero bias, that is just like a myth, but like we have to see these animals and these plants in that they're beautiful in their own native habitats, and then how they're so destructive in other ones. So I think it like helps you to be just more open to both sides of things a lot of the times too. So
I also feel like everybody goes through that process of like hating invasive species with like a super passion, and they get like so angry at them, and then they eventually realize like it's not their fault that they're there, it's our fault, and then that like hatred shifts towards people, and then you start to appreciate the like different like advantageous like traits that all of these invasive species have. And then you start to like really admire them to like that degree. Obviously, like there's still like, oh, I can't believe I have to control all of this stuff. But at the same time, like there is that appreciation, that shift in appreciation. So it's not all bad all the time.
No.
So
sometimes it's a bit overwhelming and sad because you're like doing the research and stuff and seeing the impacts of these different things, and it can be kind of difficult. But conservation optimism, my friends.
Right. There must be a term for, I mean, I guess conservation pessimism would be the term.
Well, but there's eco anxiety is a thing.
That's like basically what I'm going to change my last name to. We like people who work in the scientific field, we have that constant, because we have access to all of the information, not all of the information, but we have like better avenues for access to the information. We just surround ourselves with different things, like basically like doom scrolling, but for nature. And so like especially as educators, you have to physically look up and read all that information. And like the overarching theme most of the time is just like, we are so fucked. We're so dumb. I'm so angry. We're so screwed. But like, it also helps you learn positivity and like positive thinking, and also fuels, you know, your conservation efforts and stuff like that. So like, if you're one of those people who is listening to this podcast and you're like, oh my God, I can't listen to this all the time because it's always negative and it's always, you know, like, we understand you, we feel you, and it's okay to feel that way. That's one thing that can fuel passion, but also don't overwhelm yourself. Like, don't take on more than you can, and just do whatever you are capable of to make a difference in the world as far as conservation and, you know, environmental awareness goes.
Exactly. Nicholas, when you walk through your forest areas, then would you say you're doom strolling?
Oh God. No, because my forest areas are pretty. When I go to like a non-native, I'm not. That's a gross exaggeration. A lot of my woodlands are unmanaged due to public concern that removal of the invasive species won't make them look natural enough. But let's not get me on that train right now, because I'm going to get real upset.
We're not going there.
So the next question. And I'll do a few more. I'm probably going to skip a few of these because this is a snip and we don't want it to go too long, and we're already at about 30 minutes. So
yeah, we can always do another one.
Yeah. So Lark Like the Bird asks, what's your favorite wildlife encounter you've ever had? You want to start with this one?
Oh, boy.
I've got one on the top of my head if you want more time to think.
You go for your first one, and I'm going to try to narrow it down in my brain.
Right. So first I'm going to preface it with like the cheat of like, I don't have a favorite anything, not a favorite food, not a favorite type of music, not a favorite song, nothing like that. I don't have a favorite movie or anything. I like things that I like, and I don't like things that I don't like. However, that being said, so what I'm saying is every encounter with an animal and things like that, I cherish and I do enjoy. But I will say that one that does stand out, which I know is super contradictory to what I just said, it's not my favorite, but it's something that I will always hold like very close to me, is discovering the presence of baby owls. Several of them nest every year in the woods that I manage. And I got to like, because of their close proximity to people, I had to like constantly check in on them and make sure they were good. Obviously from a safe enough distance and stuff like that. But they actually nested 10 feet off of a trail that is like heavily used. So every day I would kind of go and sneak up and just make sure that they were doing okay. And I got to watch these little tiny great horned owls from like these little cotton balls grow into these like fully fledged, actually fits accurately, these fully fledged little buboes that branched and then flew off into the woods to, you know, make their own areas and stuff like that. I got to watch that like a few times last year. So looking forward to hopefully repeating that process this year with some new nesting individuals and things of that nature. But yeah, that one stands out to me, I guess.
That's beautiful. I have one I kind of want to share, but I'm also trying to pitch it somewhere, so I'm not going to share it.
Right. All right. To be continued.
To be continued. Yeah. You know, I'm going to actually go with a bird too. I've had some nice bear ones, but once there was these two eagles, bald eagles in a tree when I was fishing with my grandpa. And I think this kind of like resonates with me because I was kind of young. So my grandpa's fishing and I go over into the woods and there's these two eagles in the tree, and because I was young, for sure I was way too close. Like, I mean, this is in retrospective, so like don't judge. But anyway, I was a few trees away just watching, and they were just watching me. And I mean, they didn't seem agitated or anything from what I can remember, but I just remember looking at these big, huge, beautiful birds. And then I remember I went back to my grandpa and then I came back to look definitely at a further distance, and the one, and it's a bald eagle, like swooped down from the tree and just went like right past me. And I mean, it had to be a couple feet away, but I could feel the whoosh and like see its wingspan. And I just like, I don't know, the just whoosh.
I like that. Yeah. No, I know what you mean.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was just really incredible. And just to see how big they were. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think that was probably I never really thought about it too much in this way until right now, but like a very key moment for me.
Right. Yeah. It's weird that both, like, I mean, we don't really particularly have like a specific like association with birds, but both of us did choose bird.
Yeah.
things that came to mind.
Yeah, I mean, I have some cool bear ones too, but we'll do more wildlife encounters another
Right,
day.
yeah. Okay, so next question is, does anyone have a plan for red-eared sliders in the future? By Timotheus or Timotheus. And that one is simple. Yes. And the next question is, yeah, people have plans for red-eared slider. There is current legislation banning their sale in several countries and states. There are active removal, euthanization, not relocation, but like removal from the wild going on in other countries and states and things of that nature. So yes, it's not all encompassing right now, but I'm sure it'll continue to expand as people are seeing the massive detrimental effects from this super common invasive species.
The question wasn't asking about an episode, was it?
No, we haven't talked about red-eared sliders.
No, but if we were going to do
does anyone have a plan for red-eared sliders in the future? Haha. Okay, that might be.
No, I think your answer was right, but also
probably.
Sure.
Yeah.
Depending which one it was. Sorry about that, friend.
Is it true male mosquitoes don't drink blood and aid in flower pollination? Asked by Summer.
Ooh.
I will let you take that one.
Pick me. I actually had to do like a whole page on mosquito family once. So
perfect, because I was just gonna say yes and move on. So go ahead.
Yeah, I won't go crazy on it, but yes, it is true. Also, there are types of mosquitoes that don't, like different species that none of them drink blood. But the reason for drinking blood is the females, they call it like a blood meal. And the only time they do it is before they're actually going to go lay their eggs because they need the extra nutrition. So both female and male mosquitoes drink nectar and therefore aid a bit in pollination. I'm not sure, I don't think they aid to the same extent as bees or, bats or other big like furry boys, but they definitely aid in pollination, and only the females bite of certain species before they lay eggs to give extra protein to their larvae to survive. Yes.
Love it. Okay, so we'll have two last questions, and I save these ones for last because one is directed specifically at me and one is directed specifically at you. And I haven't read either of them. I just saw that it says for Nicholas and for Kirsten at the top. So both of these are from the Wildlife Brothers, which if you guys aren't following them, go check them out on, I believe, YouTube, and their TikTok's doing pretty well right now. So follow them. Great science communicators and educators. Good people.
I love those guys.
I'll start with you. For Kirsten, how has living in the tropics affected your mindset about ecology?
Well, first, unfortunately, I don't live right in the tropics because I live like up in the Andes, which is definitely different, but I've gotten to visit quite a bit the tropics. And I think I'm going to answer it as how is living in Ecuador kind of changed it.
I mean, I feel like when we're talking tropics, like you're significantly closer to that than for example, this guy, you know what I mean? Like, I think it's just more of like a generally warmer climate, but I do understand that your elevation doesn't make it like, but good distinction to make.
No, it totally has changed. For me, Ecuador is such a cool place because it's a relatively small country and there's so many different types of ecosystems in such a short period. Like, for example, here up in Quito, we're up in highlands and the moorlands are right here. And then you drive an hour and a half and it's cloud forest. And then you go like a little bit further and if you go the other way, you're in the Amazon. And I think it's really helped me learn so much about the insane diversity. I've learned so much more about how much there is out there and how amazingly different, like just, a few hundred meters in elevation changes the plant and the animal community. That has really changed a lot living here because you see such a big difference in such a short area. And that kind of leads into the fact of how much more important it is to me to protect as much as we possibly can because there's so much difference in such a small range. So we protect one area, but this other spot has a completely different set of species in it. So every square kilometer is precious. That's what I would say.
Good answer.
Good question.
Now my turn. For me, do you find online outreach or in-person education to be more effective? This is actually a really good question, because I think the obvious answer would be me to say that obviously in-person education is better, because I think when we think of online education, we're thinking of like Zoom, not that like that type of educational outreach. And maybe, whichever one of the Wildlife Brothers asked this didn't mean it that way, and they meant it in the way that I'm interpreting it as, but like social media, obviously. Because as far as like educational outreach goes through like social media and stuff like that, I can reach like potentially hundreds and thousands, or, ideally someday millions of people. And pretty much anybody is capable of doing that via social media. I mean, there's obviously certain factors that make certain people more popular than others, and it can be difficult to achieve a massive, massive following. But if you're pretty consistent with it and your content is attainable and easily understood by a lot of people, then I think a lot of people can use that to reach more of an audience than in-person learning. Like, no matter how much effort I put into in-person talks and speaking sessions and events and things like that, I'm still only ever going to reach maybe a few thousand people a year, versus an Instagram post where I can reach 10,000 people in a single post. And in that respect, social media is a lot more of an effective tool for educational outreach. But of course, that does come with limiting factors, which are, pretty evident, I think. I don't think I need to really explain the drawbacks and stuff of social media and whatnot. But yeah, I think either way, either one is effective. Even if you go your whole life and you only teach one person to like appreciate the environment, you've done a positive thing. So I don't understand why it's always tied to like how many people you reach. Like if your account only reaches 10 people, but they follow your stuff, you've taught 10 people to appreciate conservation and nature in whatever means you're doing. So don't get discouraged if you don't have 1 million followers. Don't get discouraged if, one of your social media posts does better than the others. Don't get discouraged if you don't even have a social media following and you only do in-person educational stuff, or you're just talking to your family at the dinner table about conservation. That's important work that you're doing, and it's important for conservation. So as far as I'm concerned, whatever you can do and are able to do it. And it's very much appreciated from people like myself and Kirsten who, actively work for conservation and education and things like that. So yeah, that would be my answer on that. And I think that we can probably wrap up this episode after that.
Perfect. Yeah, that was fun. Thanks to everyone that sent us questions. And for those who were not answered, we can probably record one of these easy peasy soon and go ahead and post it again too, and they can just be extras.
Ask us new questions. So
yeah. So if your question didn't get answered, we'll get to it.
Cool beans.
Next time. Okay.
Bye.
Thanks for joining. See ya. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Anthropocene.
Be sure to follow us on all social media and feel free to reach out to us with any comments, corrections, or suggestions for future episodes or species you'd like to see us cover.